I'm going to start talking and not waving. All right, so I think it is probably time to start. So thank you for coming to the talk today. So I'm having a few issues with my slides, which I'll try to fix. Okay. So my name is Karen. I was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, which counts for my strange accent. So I hope you can understand me. So at the minute I live in Tokyo, and this is a view from my apartment. It's very pretty. We also have mountains. Okay. So I'm having a complete delay from when the slides appear on the screen as to they appear on my computer, which is why I'm standing here pushing buttons, feeling really silly. Okay. So I've been working with volunteers in the Perl community for just over 15 years now. I was a founding member of the Belfast Pearlmongers. I organised a YAPC Europe in Belfast in 2004. I was part of the venue committee for the YAPC Europe Foundation, and I started working for the Perl Foundation in about 2008. So now that I'm president, I have many, many more opportunities to mess up than I ever did before. So today I thought I would talk about making mistakes, because I believe that we learn far, far more from our mistakes than we ever learn from our successes. When we make mistakes, we spend time thinking about them, we scrutinize them, we justify them, we get defensive over them, but they're a great way to learn. When we're successful, we often don't know why, which we only find out the second time we try to repeat something. So when we work with volunteers, which I do all the time, the Perl Foundation has about 50 volunteers at the minute. The thing that we really want is for them to be motivated. We don't pay them, they don't get a lot of praise, and we need them to have the energy to keep going. But I've discovered that some of the mistakes that I make them anything but motivated. I have learned how to demotivate people. So I want to tell you today about some of the things I've done wrong in the hope that in the future you actually manage to be motivational. So for me, the number one thing that kills my motivation is procrastination. Procrastination is devious. It infiltrates every aspect of our work and everything we do with our volunteers. It even makes it incredibly difficult to write conference talks because it's so much more interesting for me to read research papers on how to procrastinate and why we procrastinate, to look at social psychology textbooks and read about procrastination than it is to write this talk. And it was all a complete waste of time because I'm sure everybody in this room knows what procrastination is. But I am a master procrastinator. And while I know that it manages to demotivate me, it causes me undue stress, I put myself under pressure when I shouldn't, I also know that what I do has an impact on all my volunteers and demotivates them as well. So, most of the work I do involves email. And we all get far, far too much email. And I do get fed up starting. I'm really sorry for the delay in responding, but I do it all the time. And I know it's unrealistic to expect our volunteers to respond quickly to messages. And people say things like, if it's important, they'll ping you about it again. But I have found that this does not work well. I have been really surprised by what people think and how it affects a project when I don't respond to email. I was shocked the first time that someone told me that they assumed that I didn't like their idea. I read their email, I moved on to other emails that I had to complete that day of all the usual management problems of dealing with the urgent over the important, and I meant to get back to them, but I didn't. And they assumed that I thought their idea was stupid. And when a person assumes that, they don't ping you, they don't get back to you. They're completely demotivated, and the project goes nowhere. My not responding to their message zapped all their motivation. I thought you were rude. Again, I understand that there's some rudeness involved, if you're ignoring someone's message, but I didn't realize that sometimes when I don't respond that they thought I was incredibly rude. I've had people think that I was stuck up, that I was too interested in, the position I had than to respond to people's email. So I have learned that it's very important to reply to emails when you get them, even if you have very little time. Because it doesn't actually take that long to send a message to someone that says, I got your email, but it's going to take a bit of time for me to respond, and if you don't hear from me by such and such a time, please feel free to ping me. It doesn't take that many minutes out of my day, and I'm really trying to learn to do that. It is so strange with the delay on the screen. Okay. I have had people, when I didn't respond to them, assume that they had caused me great offense. Now, I have received some emails, some rather offensive things from people that were meant to be offensive. I'm not talking about those messages. I'm talking about pleasant, polite emails where someone suggests an improvement program, an improvement to your website that I don't get round to responding to. And they think that I was offended by it or that their idea was bad. And yet again, they're demotivated and they don't continue with the work. So I do think it's really important for us to try to find a way to manage our email and to remember that when I get hundreds of emails, as I'm sure many of you do, in a day, but we have to remember that sometimes when we receive an email from our volunteer, it's one of the few they sent that day, but it's about something that's very important to them, and that it is actually important to try to respond. Now, I know that my procrastination on email is a problem, but one of the other things I have learned to do is how to teach all the other people in the Perl Foundation to procrastinate. This is not what I set out to do when I'm leading a project, but I have taught people how to procrastinate. So, when I first started, I sent a lot of emails like this. I asked for people for their thoughts. I wanted their opinion. I was new in what I was doing. But I didn't realize that sending such abstract, vaguely worded email helps other people procrastinate. They get this email, they haven't got a quick response to it. So they ignore it, they put it aside, and they don't respond. So I've had to improve how I do these emails. So, this version, I assume it's a different version of the email. So asking people if they're happy for things to go ahead. It's not as abstract as the last message, but I have found that when I'm dealing with people, I also receive a lot of email. But the thing they want to tell you about is when they're deeply unhappy. People don't want to let you know when they're happy. They read it and they're okay with it, so they don't respond. They're much more willing to respond if they're not happy. So I have got much better with my writing of email. I now ask people to respond if they don't want something to go ahead. I give them a date for when they need to respond by, and I let them know when the new proposal is going to go live. Because I have discovered that if you're completely against a proposal, you will respond to me fast. And this is working much better for me. Yeah, having a really hard time getting the slides to change. Okay. So, the other thing I have found with email is that it's very important when you send it to let people know what you want them to do with it. So I used to send big long emails with lots of different points in them, and I wanted people to respond to lots of different things. But of course, no one can really do that. I mean, the first person that responds might respond to one point and then everything else disappears from the thread and no one talks about it again. And there are times like this, I do send emails like this, where you just want to let people know what's happening. And it's very important actually to let your volunteers know what's happening. But if that's all you're doing, you should just mark it that you're just letting them know and you're not expecting them to respond to the email. And when you do write long emails, it's a good idea at the bottom of them to put the simple question again as to what it is you actually want them to do with the email. So hopefully I have got better with them. It's definitely a day when I wish I hadn't used slides. Okay, deadlines. So, in the computer industry, we're always making up deadlines. And then we don't keep them. And when you're working with volunteers, a lot of the deadlines are, and we're not very clear about them, and they're not even real deadlines necessarily, because everybody knows they can just send you an email and you will change the deadline. So the hardest thing I have found working with the Perl Foundation is when we work with external organizations. If you're doing a project like GSOC or Outreachy that we were talking about this morning, the deadlines are not ours. Somebody else is setting a deadline and they are set in stone. So when GSOC wants an application by a certain date, it has to be in. So it's really important to remember when you're working with people that if you know of a hard deadline, that you let them know the instant you know about it. There is nothing more upsetting than getting an email that says, this must be filed by 10 o'clock tonight. And then you look it up on the internet and discover they've known that for about 4 weeks. But they never thought to tell you. They just told you it was a task you had to do, but never bothered mentioning the actual deadline. So one of the things that's caused me years is language. So I come from the UK, or from Ireland, and I don't speak the same version of English as most of the people in this room. And it sounds like a similar language, but at times words have completely different meanings. And the Perl community is huge, and we deal with people from many, many different cultures. So we have to be careful not to misunderstand each other. So when you receive email that appears to be offensive, do wonder if you're misunderstanding what the person is saying. When I first worked with the Perl Foundation, I was much more quick to jump to conclusions that was being written to me, but I realized that I've misunderstood people all the time. So, this is a mistake I made. I once wrote an email in haste that I didn't read back through that was ambiguous and not clear. And I was on my way to a YAPC, which means I wasn't reading email. And when I got back, this is what people assumed I was saying, that I was going to cut all the funding to Perl 6 that we did. This is not what I was saying. And I was completely horrified, but it actually took me quite a while to fix the mess. I was actually talking about a very specific grant that wasn't going well, that we weren't going to continue. But, you know, I made the mistake in email, and if I had have read it again, I probably wouldn't have done that. This is a phrase, it's one of my favorite differences between UK English and American English. You can receive an email from someone that gives you information about your grants program or something, and you can reply back and say, I didn't appreciate that. Now, in the United Kingdom, if I replied with you, I didn't appreciate that, I mean, thanks for letting me know. That was very good of you. I didn't know the American meaning. I didn't appreciate that. As in, how dare you tell me that? I didn't know that. It causes a huge communication problem, and you've got people annoyed with you and upset with you from using the same words that they use all the time. I've also had a problem with swearing. Now, I don't swear a lot, but I come again from a different culture. And whilst in email, swearing doesn't come up a lot, it does come up sometimes when volunteers are like this in the same room, when we speak to each other. We sometimes use it when we're talking. And I remember a volunteer who was teasing me, and I told him to piss away off. Well, he thought I was deeply offended, that he had really hurt my feelings. Where I come from, it's just a phrase to mean, go away, stop mucking around. It wasn't meant to be offensive at all. He thought I'd used the F word. I mean, he was really shocked, and I was thinking, no, I was just being playful. But again, words don't mean the same things, and there are some swear words that are used from the United Kingdom that are really offensive in America. And there are some really strange words used in America. I mean, the first time someone talked about a fanny pack to me, I was really, really horrified. I really had no idea where they were going with that. But again, just different uses of language. Okay. See if we can get the slides to change. They changed? Okay, so trying to do too much. Everybody who works with volunteers, everybody who runs a project tries to do too many things. You start with one thing, and I actually find it very hard to say no. And it's a really good word to learn, no. But it's difficult, so I start with one thing, and then I have 50 things, and then I'm running a conference. You know, it just escalates. But the big problem with that escalation is it causes burnout. So we cause our volunteers to burn out. We let them all pick up too many things. And then by the time you're doing 50 different things, if I come to you and say, how can I help? I can't help. Because by the time you tell me what it is I need to do to help you, you think in your head you could already have done it. And it happens to us all the time. I ask people to hand a task on to me and they go, oh, but by the time I did that, I'd have it done anyway. So my advice is delegate often and delegate early. Don't try to take on too much yourself. Remember that there are lots of people who can help us. Okay. So, it's very easy to get upset and offended about things. I was in a conversation the other night where someone was very hurt because they thought I had deliberately done something to them, that I had deliberately left them off a list, that I deliberately didn't want them involved. No, that's not really what happened. You know, there was a new list created and somebody stupidly forgot something. But when people think you've taken a deliberate action against them, they don't tell you at the time. They wait to months later when they feel they can talk about their hurt. So we have to remember when things happen to us in our roles in leading projects and stuff, that it's very rare that someone's trying to be malicious or to hurt you. Mostly we just want to work together and achieve the same end. And on that note, we should always apologize. It's really important to apologize when you make mistakes. It can be difficult to do so, but I recommend that we do that, especially with our volunteers. And of course, we should always thank them. And we should even thank them when we're like me and overthink everything and are really worried about thanking anybody in case you've left someone else out. At the start of the year, I tried to write an email thanking everybody who worked for the Perl Foundation. In the end, I had to give up. But that was a mistake. I should just have started with something smaller. So I recommend that you thank your volunteers. It's very hard to be a volunteer in the Perl community. You know, there's so much stuff on email and IRC and in different places that can make you feel bad about what you're doing. But, you know, we all do our best to do good, so we should give thanks. So thank you all for coming. Okay, so I apologize in Japanese, sorry. So I'm out of time, so I'm not going to ask questions because I don't want to eat into the setup time for the next speaker. Thank you.